Okay, welcome everyone to our third part of our series on leadership, and we've done 4 principles, and those who did not make the first 2 classes, they're available online, but we're going to do the third class, and we're going to do principle 5, 6, and 7, a very bold goal. So principle number 5 of our legacy of leaders, 10 leadership principles we can learn from great Jewish leaders. Number 5, let's jump straight in. Leadership means believing in the people you lead. Leadership means believing in the people you lead. Let's have a look at a story. I think most of our classes do actually go right back to Moshe Rabbeinu, one of the greatest leaders who had a very, very difficult and challenging time. And there is a story when Moses was given his mission to lead. Anyone know how old he was when he was told to lead? We mentioned that already. How old was Moses, when he was told to take on the leadership of the Jewish people and to take them out of Egypt? He's about 80 years old. You would have thought he was ready for retirement. 80 years old. He earned it. He had a very, very challenging childhood, when dealing with Pharaoh. And right now he's being told to get back in. Hashem said, I've seen the affliction. This is the book of Shemot. I've seen the affliction of my people, that is in Egypt, and I've heard its outcry because of its taskmasters. I shall descend to rescue them from the hand of Egypt. Now go, and I shall send you to Pharaoh. Okay, so Moses is being told, and we already spoke in an earlier class, that he resisted for an entire week. He didn't particularly want this job. But he's told to do something else. And this is the key part we're going to focus on. Go and gather the elders of the children of Israel. Say to them, Hashem, the God of your forefathers, has appeared to me, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I shall bring you up from affliction of Egypt to a land flowing with milk and honey. Okay, that's not New York. That's milk and money. This is the land of Israel, milk and honey. Moses responded in the following way. Follow carefully. But they won't believe me. Talk about the Jewish people, by the way. And they will not heed my voice. For they will say, Hashem did not appear to you. It's like, come on, they're not going to buy this. I'm turning up out of the blue after all these years of being away, and I'm going to walk in there. And by the way, this is one of the reasons that Moses wanted his older brother, Aaron, to actually go and take the Jewish people out of Egypt, because he'd been the chief rabbi, as it were, for all those years. Take Moses, he's older than me, and he's had experience. But that wasn't his job. Moses was the leader. Reluctant at this point, but he was the leader. However, he seems to be bad-mouthing the Jewish people to some degree, doesn't he? They're not going to believe me. What's he saying? So God says, no problem. I'm going to give you 3 signs that you are going to show Pharaoh and that you can show the Jewish people. And what are these signs that they're going to believe in? Number 1, your staff is going to change to a snake, which happens right then. Your hand is become afflicted with saras, with leprosy. In other words, it happens at this point, and he says, if they don't believe you, show them these unusual signs. And number 3, the water in the river we poured onto dry land had become blood. Interestingly enough, they didn't need these. This was more for Moses. These were lessons for Moshe Rabbeinu at this time when he was being told to do this mission. Now, by looking at the story, you're like, okay, these are 3 random miracles that happened to Moses, which were persuading him and giving him the impetus to go and take the Jewish people out of Egypt. But what's interesting is the particular choices. Follow carefully. Staff turning to a snake, saras, and this river. Says Rashi, the first 2 signs that happened to him at that moment were actually a message for Moses. Not for him to display to the people. They didn't need it. He had said something wrong about them. What did he say? They're not going to believe me. Whoa, who are you to judge the people? You don't believe in them? You don't think they have enough faith that they're going to believe that I am going to reveal myself to them? The staff which he had in his hand, he was deserving to be hit with. Wow, those are big words. They're not my words. That's Rashi who gets it from the oral tradition, because he did not trust his people. The snake appeared to prove to him that he has spoken lashon hara, evil speech. Remember, the snake is reminiscent, actually it was the same snake, that was in the Garden of Eden, that spoke badly then. So it was a sign. Snakes are signs of bad speech about the Jewish people, like the snake in Eden. And the leprosy on his hand, actually, was also a sign that he had spoken badly, because when a person spoke badly, the Torah tells us they get something called tsuras. They get certain hand afflictions. He casted doubts on the Israelites, and he was punished. And then we have our concept over here. In order to lead, we need to have faith in the people that we are put in charge of, whether that's a company, whether that's an organization, whether that's a community, whether that's a family. We've got to believe in those who work for us. We don't believe in them, bad things are going to happen. Okay? Why should we? Why should we? Maybe all these people are terrible. Why should we? So there's a basic premise that comes with this. And the basic premise is we believe in people because humans are made in the image of God. And that is based upon a verse in Bereshis, in the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 26 to 27. And it says over there, and God said, let us make man in our likeness. They shall rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, over the animals, the whole earth. So God created man in his image. In the image of God he created him, male and female, he created them. Says Maimonides the Rambam, among all of God's creatures, only mankind is endowed with godliness. And what is that? Morality. Image of God is not a physical image. This is different opinions. The Rambam is saying it's one of morality. Right? God is seen as a good God. Right? Our idea of God, actually the word God comes etymologically is related to the word good. Right? So God is good, and ultimately we are made in the likeness of God, made by God. God blew in breath into Adam, and that's how he brought life in, and therefore there's a piece of God in all of us, as it were, and therefore we have the ability to do good. So this is the big decision. Do we believe in humanity or not in Judaism? I mean, that's a big question. Because if we don't, then forget about it. Then you've got bad people, just wipe them out. Maybe the Nazis got it right. They're elements who are just very bad, and we just say, squish them. And the answer is ultimately no. There are people who choose bad and thereby forfeit the right to life. That's possible. But ultimately, people are good. That is a basic premise in Jewish thought, and that's based upon this idea. And therefore, when it comes to leading people, whoever those people are, we have to say they make mistakes, deserve to be punished at times, but ultimately, people are good, which I personally find quite encouraging, because I deal with so many crazy people, thank God. And ultimately, we say people make mistakes, bad mistakes, but they can be good. This carries on in Jewish history. Let's jump forward to another one of the great leaders of Jewish history, and that is King David, David HaMelech. King David trusted in his people. That was what he was famous for, having tremendous emunah. And I'd like to quote you a Talmudic piece about a story of King David. This is going to be pretty unusual to you, and it's a whole story in and of itself, but one of the grandsons of Moses was named Yohanatan. Yohanatan. And he's described in the book of Judges, chapter 17, that he fell to the level of being the priest of idolatry. Even great people can have bad children and bad grandchildren. Nothing new or unusual about that. What was his problem? Well, they say his motivation for being idolater, for giving up on his belief of his religion, because his grandfather was Moses, right, was he liked money. I know it's hard to believe that Jewish people can do the wrong thing because of money. Take it as a possibility right now. Don't have to believe me. However, that was the problem. And for money reasons, he ended up being involved in an area which he shouldn't have been involved in. King David did the following thing. He said, we're going to give him a job. We're going to put him in charge of the temple's treasury. Now, I think most people would say, yeah, he's got a money problem. We probably don't want to put him in charge of the temple treasury, which, by the way, could bring in a vast amount of wealth. However, it worked. And King David was able to channel that desire, which had been used for the wrong, for the good, because he believed in Yehonatan. And subsequently, by the way, his name changed to Shavuel. And the word Shavuel means shav, to return. Return to God, actually. Shavuel, to return to God. Now, most people would have completely dismissed this guy and said, you know what, you should know better. Moses was your grandfather. We don't have Moses' grandfather, and we don't worship idols and get involved. And you don't. And King David said, that's not the way. He looked deeper, and he was able to have what we refer to as the eye of King David. see the real potential of a person. Where did King David learn this from? Well, King David had an ancestor by the name of Ruth. Rut in Hebrew. And she was a very, very special woman. She was actually a convert to Judaism. And we learn many of the laws of conversion in Jewish thought from this woman, Rut. Probably one of the most famous converts after Yitro, Moses' father-in-law. And listen to the story. It's a fascinating story. When I was in yeshiva, I became obsessed with this story for a number of reasons. But it's a fascinating story. I'll give you just a snippet, and just to try to connect it to what we're describing today. Because remember, King David is going to learn this trait from somewhere. And it says there was a guy called Elimelech, who was a very, very wealthy man. And he lived in Israel. And a terrible famine, it says in the book of Ruth, came upon the land. And Elimelech decided to leave Israel because he didn't want to support the people. He wanted to keep his money. I know it sounds unusual. People would leave their countries because they didn't want to, pay taxes and give up their nationality. But no. So there goes Elimelech. And he's got a wife called Naomi. And they have 2 sons. These 2 sons end up marrying Moabite women. It's a quick decline once they leave Israel. A little side point over there. 2 non-Jewish women, Orpah and Ruth. These 2 sons die right after Naomi's husband, Elimelech, dies. So now you're left with 3 women. You're left with Naomi, you're left with Orpah, and you're left with Ruth. Okay? She says, listen, my husband's dead, your husbands are dead. You just go home now, it's all over, and I'm going to return to Israel. And what do? So Orpah kisses her mother-in-law, who she loved very, very much, and she left. Ruth, however, cleaved to her, and Naomi told her again, I've told you I love you very, very much, but it's over, go home. And Ruth responded on page 3, very famous lines, which hopefully you've heard before. If not, we'll do them together. She says, wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your nation is my nation, your God is my God. Wherever you die, I will die. So they came to Bethlehem together. By the way, it shows the commitment that a convert has to have. It also shows that you try to push her away. Try to push her away a little bit. Push her away with one hand and maybe brought her closer with the other. But ultimately, she allows Ruth to join them. Now they're extremely poor. Now remember, when Naomi left Israel, she was extremely wealthy. All right? She was probably the queen of the land, as it were. And at this point, she returns and she's got nothing except the dirty shirt on her back. So she sends Ruth, she's an elderly lady. She sends Ruth and says, Ruth, you go and get some food. So what they used to do was, there's actually a mitzvah that exists where you meant to leave the corn of your field to poor people, of the grains of stalk and things that fall off the animals or are left as well, and things you forgot in the field. So Ruth goes, and she goes to pick up a few wheat grains. Okay, she's really hit rock bottom over here. The field, however, was owned by a guy called Boaz. Boaz was the field owner and happens to have been a very wealthy individual, but also a leader of the time. Actually, one of the great judges among the Jewish people happens to be. He sees this woman, Ruth, and sees she acts in a very, very modest way. Right? The other women maybe weren't so modest. And he says, who is this woman? They said she's a Moabite woman. Boaz says to her, come over here, come eat bread. And he gets the conversation with her. To cut a long story short, he ends up marrying her for a very short amount of time. Does anyone know who comes out of this marriage? Well, I already told you. From Ruth, the convert, and Boaz, the leading judge in the land of Israel at that time, we get kingship. King David, King Solomon, and after that it goes son after son after son, come out from this union a number of generations later. That, they say, shows the greatness of Boaz. A great leader, yet willing at this time to not look down upon people and give people the benefit of the doubt. He saw and he believed in this pauper, and he was right. She is considered to be one of the greatest converts that the Jewish people have ever known. I want to give you just one other example. There was a great scholar which none of you have ever heard of, but those who study Talmud have, and his name was Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish. And Reish Lakish was a bandit. a very powerful individual, but a bandit, which means he would stop people on the highway, take out his gun, or whatever they used in those days in order to put people up, and he used to live in the wilderness where he made his livelihood as a bandit. The Talmud says, look how this trait carries on among the Jewish people, that there was a great Jewish leader called Yochanan who was bathing in the Jordan. But they say Yochanan was an extremely handsome man, extremely good looking. Ended up paying a price for that later on in his life. Reish Lakish saw Yochanan in the water and mistook him for a woman. And he jumped into the water, they say, in one leap and landed right next to Yochanan. At which point he probably realized, it's a guy, right? Not such a good thing to realize for him. And Yochanan says, wow, your strength, because he suppose it was a very big leap, and he saw this very powerful guy, Reish Lakish, as a bandit, and he said, your strength would be more appropriate for studying law. And he turned around to him and said, your beauty is better for women. So he kind of gave him a little dig back. And here's the unbelievable thing. We're dealing with, Yochanan was a great leading rabbi of the time. Reish Lakish was a big thief, right? A powerful individual. Rabbi Yochanan saw in him such a power, he said, you know what? If you come back and study in my yeshiva, I'll give you can marry my sister. And he introduced them, and they got married. And Reish Lakish became one of the premier scholars. You can't study Talmud and not come along many, many words of, what a chance. I mean, this guy's a thief. He's not done anything. All he did was jump in the water, Yet, the Talmud says, that is the power of a leader. They believe in people, they see something which others don't see, and they're able to bring them up and give them, and eventually, by the end of his life, Yochanan was still in Sephoris, teaching at the time, as Hanina. Reish Lakish stood on the same ground, the same level of equality, teaching in his yeshiva. That's how great a leader he was able to be. So that is principle number 5. Believe in the people and look for that good, because everyone has a spark of good. If you can tap in to that small part of good and look through the schmutz, whether that be a pauper, whether that be a thief, whether that be someone who's got a great lust for money, maybe some excellent and some good that can come out of it. But there's only a few stories. There's many, 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 many. You can have a whole talk just on stories of people you never thought would become leaders in Jewish history who ultimately did become leaders for whatever reason or possible handicap they may have had. But those are 3 good examples. Principle number 6. Now this is a tricky one. Leadership involves a sense of timing and pace. You can't rush it, and you can't wait too long. You've got to time what you do. Sometimes that timing is beyond our control and is hoisted upon us, but people will still try to rush it. This is a problem in companies, I've been told. It's a problem in communities. It's a problem in spiritual growth. It's a problem in, physical exercise. You can't jump. You've got to time it. It's a very key idea. Let's have a look at another story. And it says in the book of Numbers, Bamidbar, may the Lord, the God who gives breath to all living things, appoint someone over this community to go out before them and come before them, who will lead them out and bring them in. Why is there repetition over here? So Moses, at this point, is actually giving us, when he says these words, saying 2 things about leadership. A leader must lead from the front. See, appoint someone over the community to go out before them and then come in before them, who will lead them out and bring them in. It's a repetition. That's the question that seems to be interesting the commentators. Why is the repetition? Say he's going to go out, take him in, whatever that means. So Moses is saying 2 things. Number 1, a leader must lead from the front. He or she must go out before them. One of the traits of great Jewish leaders is they don't sit in the back and let others do the work for them. And if they're incapable of being at the front, they have to do something almost symbolic to show that they are up front. You may remember there was a great battle that happened between the Jewish people and Amalek, the nation, when the Jewish people left Egypt. Moses could not physically get involved in that particular battle, but he stood with his arms up the entire time. That didn't help too much. Actually, they say that kept the battle on the side of the Jewish people. Just that act of seeing a leader, not hidden somewhere in an office, but lifting his hands up, had a major impact upon the people. And in the merit of that struggle, by the way, his arms kept falling down. He had to have 2 people hold his arms up for him. But that act itself had a major, you'll see that's also a common trait. So that's number one, okay? A leader has to be out front. But a leader must not be so far out in front that when he turns around, he finds no one following. He must lead them out, meaning he must carry people with him. He must go at a pace that people can bear. You can't expect too much from other people. People are like, come on, let's just come with, what's your problem? There's a timing. You've got to be there with them, but don't go too far ahead of them. And one of Moses' deepest frustrations we sense, and this is like apparent right through the Torah, right through the biblical narrative, is the sheer time it takes people to change. He holds them up to a very high standard. In the end, actually, they weren't able to conquer it. And the entire generation that left Egypt were not able to make it into Israel. That's why they were in the desert for 40 years. That entire generation had to. When you lead, you're excited, you're there, you want to push them out in front. It doesn't work that way. I'll give you a very mundane example, but it's something which I'm dealing with right now in my life. Homework with children. You want to kill yourself. There is nothing worse. I have a good technique. I have my wife do the homework with the kids. But sometimes I'm called to lead my children in the world of fractions, which, by the way, I'm not kidding you, I have not done in 30 years. I do not know anything about them. All I remember is LCD, lowest common denominator, you know that stuff? It was torture then, it's torture right now. But once you get it, you try to, come on, let's get it. They're now interested in doing the nails, and right, the girls, they like do this and that, and you want to push them, and you got to go with them. You got to pace yourself, but you got to be with them, got to help with the homework. It's the worst kind of leadership. I feel for Moses having to do fractions with 3 million Jewish people, okay, so that we wouldn't become fractured, which was the problem. It is not for us to complete the task, but we cannot desist from it either. Leadership involves, therefore, a delicate balance between impatience and patience. Go too fast, people resist and rebel. Go too slow, they become complacent. This is a constant battle of pull and tug and pull and tug and push, which Moses was dealing with. Too slow? Too fast? They can't keep up. It's really about a sense of timing and pace. And one thing we do know is that time takes time. And transformation takes time, sometimes more than a single generation. Sometimes it's seeds to be planted. Funny, in Jewish ideas in education, since we're talking about it, there's two ways which they talk about it. Building and planting. Building and planting. What's building? Building is, there's a hole, you stick a brick in it, you're done. There's a problem, we fix it. But sometimes you've got to put a seed in. And seeds take time to sprout and to blossom and to fruit and to vegetate. And therefore it takes time. So one of the key ideas, even in education, is that there's times you can fix a problem, and sometimes when there's no chance of fixing it, just put in a good seed and pray that it'll come out the right way. Okay? This idea of things taking more than a single generation is that even King David, as great as he was a man who had to fight wars, good wars, but he had to fight them, and they were still wars. He was forbidden to build a temple, because the temple was a place of peace, the Beit HaMikdash, and the King David was a man of war. Therefore, his son Solomon was permitted to do it. By the way, what did King David do? He could have been completely upset, this isn't fair, stumped his feet, and then gone hidden on the table sucking his thumb, which I still do. However, he didn't do that. He built the foundations. He built the foundations. He says, I can do what I got to do, and the rest will be done after I die. I'm just bringing another example. This is a very small line over here. We're going to do more about it next week. But one of the great Jewish leaders that I consider as well in the past 30, 40 years is Menachem Begin. I'm reading this book right now. I've mentioned to you about his life and history, and he was in the opposition for many years. It must have driven him crazy. How long can you be in the opposition? Right? It's not so much like, hey, you can sit in the opposition as a leader before you get elected, if you ever get elected, for years and years and years. And he was for many, many years. He said, it's not my time. It's not my time. Suddenly, after 30 years, something crazy like that, of being involved in, action and justice and peace and politics, he said, now's my time. And he got elected. And he took it on. It's a great thing. Many people would have pulled out way, way before. Okay? So it takes time. It's a matter of pace. And it's a hard lesson, It's not an easy one in life, because we want things to happen right away. Right? We live in the immediate generation. We live in the spirituality generation, not the religion generation, I like to say. Spirituality is the immediate fix, right? I want to feel good now. Right? Religion is, yeah, you got to do this, but it's going to take some time till you get there, you know? So we've lost a taste for this. And I'm speaking about myself as well. We want immediate results. If I can't have it now, I can't have it at all, you see? We're living the generation where as the microwave ticks down from 10 seconds, we stop it at 2 to pull the food out. I can't wait. Those last 2 seconds, that's a lifetime. That is an absolute, I just cannot. It's the Homer Simpson in us, right? Where just the idea of like, there's 2 seconds left, and I was like, why does it take so long? It's actually a line of his. It's very, very true. Very, very true. It's pacing, it's time, and I personally have fallen victim to this many, many times. Right, push, and it just pushes back, and it's not our time. Ultimately, it's God's time when things happen. That's a bitter pill to swallow, but it seems to be a theme that goes right through Jewish history. It's timing, it's perspective. Things have to happen, but not in your time, they happen in God's time. Which takes us to principle number 7. And is a perfect segue, I don't mean those like 2 ill things everyone falls off, is a perfect segue into principle number 7. Principle number 7 is leaders work on themselves and possess self-control. So now we're talking about, hopefully, Jewish leaders, because the leaders who run our political establishments maybe don't do too much of this. But in Judaism, we link the two. Private behavior and how we act towards our families and how we act towards our children and how we act towards our students is very, very a good predictor of who we are and how we're going to lead others. This idea of I'll act this way at home in my relationships, but I'll act that way and then be praised when I act that way is not sufficient in Judaism. We don't look highly upon that. But they did so much good. That may be true, but at what cost? Okay, at what cost? People were hurt, right? Families were broken apart possibly. We're not so into that. Let us have a look from a very famous book called the Sefer HaKuzari. Okay, this was a book about a people, dispute whether this nation actually existed, which had a king, the king of the Khazars, and he wasn't Jewish. And he brought in a priest, Christian, and he brought in a imam, a Muslim cleric, and he brought in a rabbi and posed questions to them. And the idea being that whoever won this debate will, him and his entire nation will convert to their respective religion. And this book is available in Hebrew and in English. And there are many that say this actually did occur. There are some people out there say that all Jewish people actually come from the Khazars. This is drivel. However, I have had a student from Azerbaijan who said it's a known thing. Right? The Khazars lived over there, and this was a small town, this was a king over there, and this actually did occur. By the way, it's considered a Jewish classic and has within it some real beautiful ideas about Jewish thought and philosophy in debate style. So it's a great book to read. I recommend it. Anyway, so the Kuzari says, tell me how the upright and pious people of your religion behave. That was the question. How do the upright and pious people of your religion behave? That was the question he had for them. So the rabbi's response was, an upright person is one who's concerned with his country. He provides all its citizens with their every provision and need. He leads them justly, does not oppress them, does not give to anyone any more than their rightful share. He didn't answer the question. Yeah, so how does an upright person behave? And he came out with this very, very nice thing about goodness. By the way, this is like 1,000 years ago. Right? Just it's worth it. I don't think we actually have managed to fulfill this in our day, but leave that aside. The Kuzari said, I asked you about an upright person, not a leader. He gave me all the principles of leadership. I said, tell me an upright person. And he says, you're making a mistake. An upright person is a leader. All of his senses and attributes, both spiritual and physical, submit themselves to his command. He thus leads them just like a real world leader. The Kuzari is making an unbelievable statement over here. He says, you're misunderstanding the concept of leadership and you're misunderstanding the concept of goodness. Goodness is the goal. And if you are good, you will lead. Because we all have leading possibilities and opportunities that come our way. And in order to be a great leader, you have to be upright. So he was connecting them together. the Kuzari seemingly will separate them out. We have upright people, and they have the not nice people who are leading. And the Kuzari are saying, no, that's not how we see it. We put them together. They are not mutually exclusive realities. They are together. He thus leads them like a world leader. And he's going to quote a verse from Proverbs. He who rules, his spirit is greater than one who captures a city. A very famous quote, by the way. In other words, we are, it's hard to believe this, but we're more impressed with people who are able to control their character traits, negative ones, than we are of people able to conquer entire cities. That's where we put our respect. That is a true leader. He has shown that he is fit to govern, that were he to rule over a country, he would preside over it justly, just as he has done with his own body and soul. There seems to be this theme, if you look through the scriptures, that some of the greatest leaders had what profession? Does anyone know? Not initially. King David was a shepherd. Right? Actually, we have a whole bunch of shepherds. What is it? Some were like in the sheep business. I hear maybe the wool business, shmatas, but what's up with sheep? Is that a coincidence? All these roim, all these shepherds? It is not a coincidence, say the commentators. Because if a person can treat animals with respect, okay, and we're told that King David did, there's a possibility on that one-on-one interaction with a lower life form, there is a possibility they'll be able to treat others with respect. I'm going to just go to left field for 1 second, if you don't mind. I don't know if it's connected, but it came into my head, so I'm going to say it. I do that sometimes. Things does get in here once in a while. The way people treat those lower than them on the totem pole, as a side point, which is kind of connected, is very indicative of how they're going to treat others who are not lower down on the totem pole. Case in point, many people will go on dates. And when they date, they will go out and have a good time, and they go to the restaurant, or they go to the movies, and oh, he's so nice and she's so sweet. It's actually not so relevant how they treat you, because they're going to be in the best behavior with you. How they treat the car park attendant, how they treat that waitress who accidentally spills some wine on your brand new dress, and you completely go crazy, right? And how they go to the car park and they're like, oh, where's my car? Hey, that guy was before. Hey, I said, where's my car? 1 second, honey. No, 1 second, darling. I'm on this. I said, I'll see if... You think, what? That's not a big problem, because that's how they're speaking to them. To me, they're very respectful. At some point, you're going to be lower down than them on the totem pole. It's going to happen. Or they're going to view you that way. It's going to come back to you. I always tell you can judge a person, and I'll give it to you again, by how they treat people lower down. Not my horror, not my thought. We see this right through Jewish history. God seems to test people early on in their lives, sometimes later on in their lives, to see how they work with people lower down, in the case of many great Jewish leaders, with animals. And based upon that, they get to rise up into leadership. Leadership is founded not on oppressing or controlling masses of people. It's dealing with the small people, and then maybe they will get elevated to higher places. Okay? Says Guzari, he has shown that he is fit to govern, and that were he to rule a country, which could happen to anyone, he would preside over it justly, just as he had done with his own body and soul. King Solomon was offered a deal, we are told. He was offered a deal, which we can read in the book of Malach and the book of Kings. And we're told that he was the wisest of all people. What made him so wise? He was given wisdom. That's pretty much how it was, right? He was given wisdom, but he was offered a choice. He was offered a choice of whether he wanted to have wealth. He was offered a choice whether he wanted power and honor. He was offered a choice where he wanted wisdom. And we're told that was a real choice. Which one do you want in order to lead? And we're told that he went for the wisdom, banking on the fact, which worked out, by the way, that eventually the wisdom would lead to a lot of money and a lot of power as well. It did. He bet right. He wanted to be wise, i.e., he wanted to work on himself. That's what he said. Okay? And since the king in Jewish thought is essentially an agent of God and has a tremendous powerful position, he has to be able to discern what God wants in any situation. For this reason, King Solomon was offered, and he asked for a lave, a heart of understanding. Okay? And that's what he did. In Gibeon, God appeared to Shlomo in a dream at night. God said to him, request what I shall give you. May you grant your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, distinguish between good and evil. He asked, just help me work on myself. Because if I'm smart, then I can do the right thing. Okay? Hopefully this has become a paradigm for many great leaders. But it actually does happen. There's a famous story of one of the leaders before, who passed away right before the Second World War, by the name of Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim, that wasn't his real name, that was actually the name of a book that he wrote, and in Judaism we've mentioned before, people are named after their books. His name was Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan, and he was a Kohen. And the story is told about him that he was approached by some people, and they said, did you ever think you'd become such a major force in the Jewish world? I mean, in his life he was already a little bit, but actually my wife's grandmother, who I met him. She actually had a small grocery store in a town called Aishashuk. Aishashuk was wiped out in a single day. Everyone was killed, but she actually managed to make Aliyah right before that. Her entire family, parents, brothers, sisters, the entire town actually, including the rabbi, were killed in one day. She got to meet him because he had a little grocery as well, which he had open for a couple of hours each day, and he would actually supply them because Radin, where he lived, was a much smaller town. They tell about the Chafetz Chaim. She told me that the non-Jewish people revered him as a leader, as a great sage, in his case, a great sage, that they wanted him to walk past their field. He's a non-Jews. Wanted him to walk past the field because they felt by him walking past the field, right, he would bring blessing to their field. Yeah? How many Jews think about it that way? I invite the rabbi to my office to bring blessing to my office, as opposed to, don't come to my office, I'm going to be asked for some money. Okay, so happens to be so they approached Chafetz Chaim, this very great person. They said to him, did you realize what amazing impact you'd have upon the people? And he said, let me tell you a story. He says, I'll tell you the truth. When I was younger, I really wanted to change the world. And I tried, and I failed. So I said, no problem. I'm going to work on Polish Jewry. As I tried, and I failed. It's just too big. I said, you know what? I'm going to work on Radin, my little town. He says, I tried to change them. It didn't help. He goes, and then I said, I'll work on my family. I'll try to change my family and make them great. And I said, I failed. It was just too difficult. Too many diverse personalities. So I said, you know what? Forget about it. I'm going to work on myself. I'll become a great person of myself, the way I act, the way I dress, the way I greet people, the way I learn, everything about me. I'm going to be great. And that actually affected his family. And actually affected Radin, this small town which had been unknown up to that point, became like a major point. And say Radin to anyone in yeshiva, oh, Radin, Chafetz Chaim lived there, of course. Which ended up affecting all of Poland, where pretty much all the Jewish world was, before it was wiped out in the Second World War, and actually the entire world. There isn't a yeshiva worth its weight in salt in the entire world. Doesn't have not only his books on the shelf, but use his books daily for study. Whether learning the laws of Lashon Hara, whether learning the laws of Jewish law, on a whole number of... Which takes us to the final line, which is not my line. It's from the Green Movement. And the Green Movement, the people who want to stop depletion of the ozone layer and the melting glaciers and the big plastic ocean stuff that's flowing around the ocean, that kind of stuff. So they say you've got to think globally, act locally. Right? Now, you think about the ozone, you think about those big plastic mountains floating through the ocean, but what am I going to do? Am I going to go out? So they say, no, act locally. Just put your bottle inside the recycling bin. Happens to work very nice in terms of Jewish thought as well. We think big, but we act local. That is a sign of great leadership. We think big, but we work on ourselves. It's tough, very, very tough, because I'm very, very good at finding faults in others. I'm not very good at finding faults in myself. But if we're able to do that, we're told, it takes us to great positions of leadership. We're going to stop over there. Next week, we will finish off our list of great leadership traits. Have a great and successful week. Thank you.